Hey, welcome to I Felt the Dark. Thanks for clicking on this video. Let's jump right in. In this story, we're diving into a terrifying case of domestic violence where a husband's genitals were cut off by his own wife. This case shocked America and turned the victim into an overnight millionaire. Let's get straight to the point. John's life was a mess from a young age. His dad was never around, and his mom, who was addicted to drugs, couldn't really handle being a parent. Despite all that, John still saw his mom as a good person, even though their life was full of problems and often left him living on the streets. Because of this situation, John and his brother ended up being taken in by their aunt and uncle, thanks to the rest of the family stepping in. Under their care, they grew up pretty well. John's uncle had a daughter around his age, and she became his close friend, and the family would go to church together every week. When he got older, John followed in the footsteps of almost all his friends by joining the Navy, trying to find a new direction in life. Lorena was born in Bucay, Ecuador, but when she was 7, her family moved to Caracas, Venezuela. They were just a regular family. Her parents never split up, and she had a younger brother. Though they weren't rich, they lived a life full of love. Lorena was raised with strict Catholic rules, and her parents always showed love to their kids. From a young age, Lorena loved watching American TV shows and was fascinated by the country. To her, America was the dreamland full of freedom, and she always dreamed of going there. In 1985, when she was 16, Lorena finally got to visit America, spending a few weeks at her aunt's house. A year later, she made her dream come true by getting a student visa to study in the US. Lorena was thrilled to finally live in the country she had always dreamed of. A year after that, while attending a Marine military ball, she met John. Lorena was captivated by how handsome John looked in his military uniform. John, on the other hand, described Lorena as a very shy, straightforward girl who wasn't fluent in English. John, instantly smitten, asked Lorena to dance, and they spent the night dancing and having a great time. From that day on, they were inseparable, though every time they went out, Lorena was always accompanied by her family, even though she wasn't too thrilled about it.
Don't miss this exciting story. Watch this video until the end to get all the surprising detail. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss out on any other interesting videos. Join our community and enjoy various exciting stories every week.
But her aunt insisted on having a chaperone because it was a mandate from her parents, and she didn't want to break the rules or cause any problems. While they were dating, the people around Lorena, including the chaperone, found John's behavior really strange. Every time they went out or ate at a restaurant, John always claimed he left his wallet at home when it was time to pay. Even so, Lorena was always happy to cover the bill. To them, it didn't make any sense that John, who was handsome, charismatic, and a Marine, kept forgetting his wallet on dates. But when they brought this up to Lorena, she didn't mind at all because she was head over heels for him. John was her dream guy. A few months later, John proposed to Lorena, and 9 months after that, they finally got married with 2 wedding celebrations. Lorena felt like she was on cloud 9, believing she had everything she ever dreamed of. She married her first love, a handsome Marine who was willing to wait 9 months without ever doing the things other couples usually do. John was the only guy Lorena had ever dated, so she absolutely adored him. But unfortunately, before the honeymoon phase was even over, things she never imagined started to come to light. In the first month after getting married, John's bad side began to show. He started yelling and became abusive, which left Lorena completely shocked, because she had never witnessed domestic violence in her family. It was the first time she had ever been yelled at in her life. One time, Lorena went to pick up John from a bar and saw him drinking there with his brother-in-law. On the way home, even though John was drunk, he insisted on driving. He acted like a race car driver, speeding recklessly, making the car swerve wildly, and leaving Lorena, who was in the front seat, feeling extremely uncomfortable, stressed, and scared. The car was all over the place. Lorena begged John to slow down and even tried to grab the steering wheel, but out of nowhere, John punched her in the chest. She spent the rest of the ride home crying and in pain. From that day on, more problems started to surface. The sweet John she knew before marriage turned into a violent man. He started cheating openly, using drugs and bullying Lorena. He would often steal her jewelry to buy drugs and alcohol, and even forced her into brutal anal sex without her consent, leaving her unable to have regular bowel movements. A few years into the marriage, Lorena started working as a babysitter and also took a job at a salon as a manicurist after her shifts. John was making good money from his Navy salary, and they quickly adapted to their life together. In the same year, Lorena was overjoyed when she found out she was pregnant, thinking John would be happy too. But things turned out differently. John said they weren't ready to have a baby because their finances weren't stable. When Lorena found out she was pregnant, John didn't seem pleased at all. While Lorena was getting checked at the clinic, her mom came to visit from the US and witnessed firsthand how John was treating Lorena badly. John even humiliated Lorena in front of her mom by making fun of her body as it started to change. Around 1990, John Wayne Bobbitt ordered Lorena to have an abortion. At that time, John felt they weren't ready to have a child in their relationship and didn't want the responsibility. Even though Lorena wanted to keep the baby, John forced her to terminate the pregnancy, which only worsened their relationship and added more emotional strain on Lorena. John even threatened to send Lorena back to Venezuela and cancel her visa. Lorena, still in love with John, was terrified every day, worried that her visa would be revoked. One day, the police received a report from neighbors about a fight between the couple. When the police arrived, they smelled alcohol on John when he opened the door. The police then called Lorena outside to check on her condition. When they got to the police station, the cops held John and took Lorena in for questioning. They asked her what had happened, but Lorena, who grew up in a religious environment with a different culture, felt too embarrassed to talk about the awful things she'd been going through since the start of her marriage. She found it hard to explain how John would often be violent, including when he forced her into painful anal sex that left her bleeding and in agony. The male officer who was questioning Lorena noticed her hesitation and told her to come back in 3 hours when the female secretary would be there. But Lorena never went back because she had to work during that time. Since no charges were filed, John was released. From that point on, their marriage, which had been troubled from the start, was heading even closer to disaster. On the night of June 23, 1993, at around 4 a.m., John came home with a male friend and told Lorena that they'd be staying with them for a while. Lorena felt stressed and uncomfortable about having to live under the same roof with someone else. John had just gotten back from the bar and immediately took out his frustration on Lorena for not wanting his friend to stay at their place. Emotionally overwhelmed, John demanded Lorena do painful things, but she refused. John, unable to handle the rejection, brutally assaulted and raped her, a situation that had happened repeatedly. After that, Lorena couldn't sleep because her whole body ached, especially in the back. While John slept soundly, Lorena could only cry and endure the pain. When she went to the kitchen to grab a drink from the fridge, her eyes landed on a knife lying on the table. The 20-centimeter blade glinted in the fridge light. Without thinking twice, Lorena grabbed the knife and took it to the bedroom. John, deeply asleep, had no idea when Lorena grabbed his genitals and cut them off, taking about course of their original size. Seeing the red fluid flowing, Lorena panicked. She ran outside to the car, with the knife in her right hand and the severed genitals in her left. Without realizing it, Lorena drove with both items still in her hands. She drove aimlessly until she passed a park in front of a 7-Eleven, where she threw the severed genitals out of the car window and tossed the knife into a trash bin. After driving around in a state of fear, Lorena went straight to her friend Gina's house. Gina was shocked to see Lorena covered in red fluid and immediately called 911. Gina managed to convince Lorena to go to the hospital for a checkup. Before leaving, Lorena also told her where she had thrown the severed genitals. Gina called 911 again to help John, who was still drunk and unconscious with his genitals cut off. Meanwhile, John woke up in pain and panicked when he saw his missing genitals. The 911 responders who arrived at the scene managed to save him. At the hospital, all the doctors, nurses, and medical staff who saw John's almost non-existent genitals were frozen in shock. They all wondered what John had done to end up in such a horrific state. The doctors were baffled as they had never seen such a rare case before in the 1990s, and the technology wasn't as advanced as it is now in 2024. When John's brother and cousin heard about his missing genitals, they immediately went searching for Lorena to take revenge but couldn't find her. By then, Lorena was under police protection. The police sent out officers to search the park where the severed genitals were discarded. Their search was horrifying. One officer, searching through the grass, accidentally stepped on the severed genitals. Realizing what he had stepped on, he was so traumatized that he screamed hysterically with his eyes closed and pointed down at his foot. Too scared to pick it up, his colleague eventually retrieved the severed parts, placed them in a hot dog box in 7-Eleven, and filled it with ice. With the severed genitals found, Dr. David, a plastic surgeon, and Dr. James, a urologist, managed to perform a 9-hour reattachment surgery. The main goal of the surgery was to let John pee normally. John was really lucky because his wife told the police where she had thrown the severed parts. Many people think John should thank Lorena, because if Lorena had chosen to lie or claim that the parts were thrown into the sea and eaten by fish, John might have faced lifelong peeing problems and ended up with his genitals looking like a vagina. The couple went through a long and controversial trial. Some people supported Lorena, while others backed John. During the trial, Lorena's lawyer offered for her to plead guilty and serve 4 months in jail to avoid a 20-year sentence. Lorena refused the offer. Throughout the trial, John never admitted his faults and kept claiming that Lorena's accusations of abuse and mistreatment were lies. However, 40 witnesses testified that they had seen Lorena injured and reported it to the police, thanks to their neighbors. Unfortunately, Lorena, who had been threatened, was too scared to speak openly. By the end of the trial, Lorena gained a lot of sympathy, especially from women's activists, and was eventually cleared of all charges. She was considered to have mental health issues, depression, and PTSD from the abuse she suffered. By the end of the 4th year, Lorena, now divorced from John, officially became a U.S. citizen and changed her name from Lorena Bobbitt to Lorena Gallo. She also received financial support from some South American donors to help her live while she was still looking for a job. During that time, Playboy magazine offered Lorena a chance to do a photo shoot. She turned it down because it didn't align with her Catholic beliefs. In 2005, Lorena started opening up more and began dating a guy named David. She also founded the Lorena Gallo Foundation, which helps women who are victims of domestic violence. Thanks to her dedication, Lorena was frequently invited to appear on popular talk shows. Meanwhile, John made a surprising recovery. 3 weeks after the surgery, John discovered that his genitals were working well again and immediately shared the good news with his mom. A few months later, to test their function, John started engaging in various activities, including meeting young women for sexual encounters. In an interview with a magazine reporter, John claimed he had no issues with his genitals. Even after his recovery, he successfully had sex with 70 women. This made John quite famous and went viral, with many people and celebrities talking about him. For some of John's supporters, they were more interested in his genital story than in Lorena's tale of being an abused and supposedly saintly wife, according to John's fans. John also received numerous offers to work in adult films with payments of hundreds of thousands of dollars per appearance, not including magazine shoots and other gigs. John was later offered a role in an adult film titled John Wayne Bobbitt, an uncut story in Frankenpenis, 1996. He accepted the offer to earn money for his surgery costs. After appearing in the film, which coincided with New Year's Eve, John was invited to Howard Stern's radio podcast. At that time, Howard was a well-known American broadcaster famous for his sensational show. On the TV show, Howard offered John a chance for a second surgery. John, who was very proud of his genitals, accepted many of these offers. Soon after, Howard started a fundraiser to help with the additional surgery costs. To convince the audience, Howard even asked John to show his genitals on camera. The appearance of his genitals was compared to a giant eggplant. During the show, which fascinated the American public, John managed to raise $400,000, which he used to extend and thicken his genitals. After the show, John earned the nickname Bobbitt worm, referring to a giant worm species found by marine researchers. This worm lives at the bottom of the ocean and can regrow into a new worm whenever its body is cut. After the second surgery, which took about 3.5 hours, John's genital organ was successfully extended by 5 centimeters. After that, John moved to Las Vegas and got back into the adult film industry, starring in a movie called Frankenpenis. He also appeared in several other films related to sexuality and pornography. With his rising fame in the porn industry, John was frequently invited to Howard Stern's show. Howard admitted he preferred having John as a guest because John was more famous and had starred in many adult films, which were great for the show's ratings. John was making millions, but unfortunately, his life spiraled into a mess of drugs and paid women, with his earnings quickly disappearing on short-lived pleasures. Even though they've been divorced for a while, people still talk about John and Lorena every year. However, John is still single, and for anyone interested, it's probably best to think twice since his organ might just reach your heart, literally. As time passed, John, who was once admired for his infamous genital, started to be forgotten. His career began to fade, and he took on various odd jobs like bartending, truck driving, and working as an operator, none of which lasted long. At 47, John was in a car accident while heading to his brother's house in Buffalo. He suffered a neck injury, requiring surgery and a long recovery time. He ended up winning a lawsuit against the driver who hit him, and he now lives off that money since he can't work anymore. 25 years after the incident, their story was turned into a documentary called Lorena. Right now, John is living a pretty ordinary life again, while Lorena has found fame and happiness with her boyfriend, David. Thanks to her kindness, she's now enjoying a sweet turn of fortune. Unlike John, who kept chasing sensationalism, his career in the porn industry has faded into history. He's living alone, unable to work, and people who used to care about him have forgotten him. On the other hand, Lorena is moving forward, hoping that David will treat her well in the future. For those of you thinking about becoming John's wife, be careful because I wouldn't want to be sodomized or experience domestic violence. Actually, I'm a man. Ha ha ha. If you're interested in this story, don't hesitate to leave a comment. See you in the next story. Thanks.